Hello!
Good morning! Welcome back to another edition of Chapter Chat. This is our last virtual Chapter Chat, and we are super excited that we are bringing it back, our book club, Chapter Chat, in person next month in August. It's going to be the last Thursday of every month. We're going to meet here.
So you'll get to share this lovely setup with us.
In person. I know we're all dying to get back in person for events, so we're really excited, but this is the last one that will be virtual. And next month, hopefully we get to see you guys face to face.
Yay!
All right, so this month's book
Look at this beautiful cover.
was a non-fiction book, which I was very partial to because I am the non-fiction reader of the bunch.
And I don't pick them out on my own, but I am lucky enough to work with lovely librarians who are like, you need to read this book, and then I love it.
Love it. The Feather Thief by Kirk Johnson was the book that we selected for this month. Whoa. I read this book and I couldn't put it down. When I picked it up, I was like, The Feather Thief, beauty, obsession, and the natural history of the heist of the century.
And I heard heist, and I was like, okay, I like that. I don't, the natural world is not as much my wheelhouse. But oh my goodness, like this thing is a roller coaster in a very tiny package.
Yeah, and it's about something that I never thought I would truly care about or be so involved in, but I could not put it down. I couldn't.
And then I have been telling everyone,
Yeah.
and did you know? Like, I've become obnoxious about this book, I think.
It is pretty,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on. Okay, so let's break it down here. It starts off talking about feathers, right? Birds. We learn about Alfred Wallace. He's collecting for scientific research. He's trying to collect some specimens, birds of paradise.
We're thinking Darwin.
Yeah,
We're thinking,
Darwin era.
Exploration, adventure into all the corners of the known world to catalog what's there.
To figure out what's there, because we have no idea, right?
And then to take some of that back to Europe, specifically England.
Yeah. Break it down, try and figure out what's going on. They talk about Darwin and Wallace actually writing to each other and communicating about different theories and natural selection
and kind of coming up with at the same time
survival of the fittest. They talk about, which is so cool because you always hear about Darwin, but you never hear about Wallace. You do, but not as much.
Not unless you're reading about it or somebody's doing a deep dive on it.
Yeah, so we learn about that, and the beginning starts out, they're all collecting these birds for research, and then everyone else of status wants these birds too, because who wouldn't? I mean, if you've ever watched A Planet Earth, where they David Attenborough is always narrating the birds of paradise, or they are beautiful. So if you think those birds when we are talking about this book,
the brightest feathers, these jewel tones, and these like even crazy shaped feathers. Some of their tails are just insane. And now, beyond science, people want to collect them for their own personal museums, which of course takes money to send people out. And one of humanity's not better traits of greed and taking things so other people can't have them starts to seep into this whole exploration equation.
Yeah, and they actually show you in some of the inserts pictures of women of status with these crazy birds on their hats.
The whole bird on the hat.
Big wings. But yeah, it does start to show you, I have this because I have the status and the ability to, and you can't have this type of thing.
Yes, and then I think that's where they start to talk about the feathers become this industry for fashion. And to be able to, they start to realize it's maybe a finite resource, and some laws start to be passed about what you can have and what you can't have. So people start to get really clever about smuggling, like inside coats and secret compartments, that are being discovered as people are trying to get these feathers to the milliners so they can make these crazy hats. So you're reading along, and then...
I know, like all of this other stuff is just building up the anger,
Yeah.
right? Like these birds, and we know today, we now know better about extinction because a lot of these birds no longer exist. And
Yeah.
why? I wonder why. But it's building up, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, you learn about fly tying. Yes, fly tying
So
for fly
fly
fishing.
fishing, and I would like to just state, because I don't think they say it right away in the book, but there's multiple types. There's
Correct.
trout fly tying, there's salmon, and I'm sure other fly fishing
Yeah.
as well. And salmon don't care. They will bite. I think at one point there's a quote in the book that says they'll bite a piece of dog fur on a hook. They don't care. Trout are very picky. Salmon are not. But the Victorians in England, the nobility, decide this is what they're going to, salmon fly tying is what they're going to turn into the tradition and make it a big deal where you spend hours and hours.
I mean, almost
and
18 hours. Yeah, and they also mention at one point if you let go at any point, because
the whole
my
thing.
husband ties flies, trout flies. So I've watched the mechanism, and you have to keep tension on it because every single time that you're wrapping it around, if you let go even a little bit, your whole thing unravels and the feathers can fall off.
Because you can't secure it. It's
Yeah.
so tiny. If you secured it every single time, you would have this monstrosity.
Yeah, and so you have to just you have your hook and you just keep wrapping the feathers around with the string. But when they mention in there 18 hours for some flies, my mind is just blown. At that point, it is no longer just a hobby.
No.
You realize that these people are obsessed with these salmon flies.
And they're not fishermen, was the other part of that.
They don't fish at all.
They don't fish. They just tie them according to these strange Victorian recipes that require these beautiful feathers from these extinct or illegal to trade birds.
But at that point, 100, 150 years ago, when those people were tying these and had written books about it, those feathers were not yet illegal
Not yet.
or extinct. Those birds were still maybe in abundance, which they are not today. And so people today, you find out, go to great lengths to go to trade shows or on eBay. They mention different forums.
Sure.
Like if your great aunt Susie had
Yeah.
up in the attic, had this whole box of birds from 100 years ago,
Sure.
and then she passes, and you come to terms with them, you open it
You
up, you
find
find
that
out,
hat.
you can sell them for exorbitant amounts of money
So much money.
today to people who want them to tie flies that they don't actually
They're
fish
not going
with.
to fish with. They just want to show off skills.
And they are beautiful, I will say.
They are, and the illustrations
stunning, yeah.
are. It's beautiful.
It's not what you'd imagine like a fly tie, like the tiny little ones that are just different colors, but mostly more natural items because that's what the trout want.
Yep.
These are stunning. They are red and vibrant blue
Oh,
and yellow
bright
and
yellow,
purple and pink.
stripes, some stripes going on in there.
They are, and they're huge. They're like much larger
Than you would think.
Yeah.
So we learn about all of this in that's just the first, that's just the first third of the book. And then the author introduces this young boy,
Edwin Rist.
Edwin Rist. Edwin Rist, at a young age, gets introduced to fly tying and becomes obsessed with it. He's very good at it. At one point, he's supposed to be like the
Yeah,
up-and-coming.
The up-and-coming one from these trade shows.
Right, and
Like,
these
have you heard about?
Yeah,
Yeah,
have you
right?
seen Edwin Rist's
Edwin
flies?
Rist. And he has that mentor that's helping him and teaching him. And he just becomes obsessed, like so much so that what he's doing, so they use chicken feathers that
Right.
are dyed right now legally to tie these and mimic other things. That seems reasonable, right? Chickens are
Not very
abundance.
expensive.
Correct.
You can dye. It doesn't cost a lot of money. is the
Correct.
thing.
They're not endangered or extinct.
No.
But it's not enough. And at one point, the author reveals that Edwin just has this breaking point. Like, how can I get to the next level?
I need those
Yeah.
specialized feathers so I can follow these Victorian fly tying recipes exactly.
Exactly.
And, you know, he also is a musician. Edwin plays the flute, and he plays it very well. His dream is to play for, like, the Berlin Philharmonic. And he gets to go to school in England, a music school. And while he's there, someone from his forum says, oh my gosh, have you been to the Natural History Museum at Turing? They have this crazy bird collection from these adventurers.
Like tags on them from Charles Darwin collected type specimens,
like,
you know, like a natural history museum
historical
would
importance.
have. Yeah.
And so he decides he needs to go see them. But he knows he's not going to get in the back to see where they have all of the birds as just a visitor.
So he pretends he's a photographer.
He's like an advance man for somebody who's doing a book, and goes to see and realizes there are drawers, cabinets, hundreds of these birds.
And he like loses his mind. Like he gets so...
He goes insane. He starts taking pictures not only of the birds, but also which cabinets they're in and which drawers they're in. And apparently decides he's going to come back and he's going to take them.
But he doesn't just decide this. That was the other thing that kind of was... He thought about it for a while, but not as long as you might think. When you're going to...
Right,
I mean, I've never...
For a heist.
Right, or a heist, or I've never... My mind doesn't operate that way. But he doesn't just think about it for a while and plan on it. It's like happens over a couple of weeks that he just immediately makes this decision.
Seemed quick.
Yeah. I mean, to make a heist like this...
To a museum.
He just, in a matter of weeks, makes this plan.
Yes.
And says, I am going to steal these
And so
specimens.
essentially they're walking us through it, and he breaks in a window. He tries to cut it, but it doesn't work, so he has to actually break it in. And he has a suitcase. And he starts taking birds and then realizes, I can take more.
Because I have a suitcase.
I have the whole suitcase. And he fills this thing up to the gills, escapes back out the window,
And no one
gets on a train.
goes down to the train station, leaves. That's it. Goes back to his apartment.
And the only reason the museum knows they're missing at first is because of the
The
broken
window.
window.
And they eventually find out later. They bring in the investigator, and they do find a little piece of blood, it mentions, on a shard. But,
It doesn't match anything.
and the security guard, they mentioned, maybe was watching a soccer game at the time.
Not paying
Like,
attention.
how could this possibly happen? But the other thing that was mind-blowing to me is that, you know, the museum curator, director, or whatever, I can't remember what position they held, but they went in the next morning and they went to their most coveted birds, and they were all there.
Like the Darwin finches.
They're there, all there. The only ones that were missing were the Indian crow,
Yes,
the chatterer,
Yep.
the birds of paradise,
Yes.
and they were like, that's weird, but they're not taking the juveniles
Right.
or the immature or any of the females because they're not as brightly colored.
Only the males.
Only adult males.
But they can't figure out why someone would want this particular collection of birds.
And for a museum like that, they didn't have a record of exactly, which is also mind-blowing to me. I guess I'm not a curator and I don't know, but we have a catalog of books that is completely cataloged, right?
And we're constantly checking to make
the
sure
record and
this, it says we have this, do we actually have it? Or we want this, we don't have it. Like, we're all sort of running around doing that all the time.
But to have Darwin era, you know, Wallace birds open up drawers full, but they don't have a record of how many were in each one.
And as someone who appreciates history, right, it's kind of mind-blowing.
That you didn't have a record, at least an updated one, to know how many birds were actually missing. Like, I would have thought we would have been able to figure that out right away.
This drawer has this drawer has this many, this drawer has this many.
I know, but he gets back to his apartment.
He gets back to his apartment.
This is the other mind-blowing thing. Like, he doesn't know how many he took. He was just kind of going on adrenaline initially.
In a frenzy.
Yeah, just going, throwing some in. I can fill more.
and he starts to count.
299 birds. 299 birds.
Which is
From our
insane. Insane. And that's the thing. I think taking 299 anything from a museum seems ridiculous. And he initially, wants to use the feathers himself. He realizes he can probably make some money selling some of the feathers. But eventually he's selling whole birds.
Yeah. And he gets so involved with it on these forums, and he has his own website.
He does.
But at what point is someone going to be like, and start to catch on when you are selling 55 chatterers? Where did you get 55 chatterers?
How does an
yeah.
American flute playing student in London figure out where is he getting these from?
And that's the other thing. Flute player. He realizes that he can make money to purchase
a golden flute, which it's insane.
To think about our historical record, these things that are irreplaceable, these specimens from history collected by Darwin for a golden flute.
It's a double hit of I want something. I want these feathers so I can make these ties so I can be the best. Now that's not enough. I also want to sell them so I can get all the money so I can have a golden flute to go play in one of these great symphonies.
Can you see why we were so obsessed with this book?
And just frustrated. So that's the second half of the book, is describing how this whole thing sort of happened. The third part is where the author hears about it. He's getting into fly fishing, and somebody tells him the story of this crazy kid who broke into a museum he goes to trial. This is, I guess I skipped over a little bit. He goes to trial, and during the trial it comes out that they suspect he has Asperger's. And there had just been another case that talks about somebody committing a crime while being on the spectrum, and that case sort of sets precedent for not having as severe a penalty because they couldn't help it. And so Edwin Rist, his final sentence is probation.
Yeah, like nothing.
He does no jail time.
Nothing.
He is supposed to pay back some of the things, the money that he got from selling these birds. And the author realizes if he stole 299 birds and they recovered so many birds, there's a gap.
Yeah. This number doesn't equal this number. Where are those? I can't remember how many it was.
90 something?
63? I don't remember. Birds.
64.
Where'd they
I
go?
want to say 64. Who has them?
Why are we not able to find those? And the other heartbreaking thing of the ones that they did recover, a lot of them are useless to the record now because he had removed all of the tags.
He took the tags.
He took the tags off because you don't need the tags to be able to. And of course, when you're selling them illegally, because you just stole them, you can't keep the tags on these items. So the ones that they did recover mean nothing anyway. Like, they got them back, great.
But they don't know where they're from.
I forget, it was only very few that still were in his room that had the tags that are still able to be considered significant. But everything else, nothing.
No, which is, it's heartbreaking. And so the third part of this book is the author deciding he's going to find out where those extra birds are. And he gets some theories about Edwin Rist maybe didn't work alone. So he's combing back through the forums and the websites and using the internet Wayback Machine to figure out
But
who
a
was he
lot,
talking to.
and a lot of the forms have been taken down or deleted or...
And the people who bought those feathers are not going to come right out and be like, oh yeah, that's me, I bought illegal feathers from Edwin, I remember.
So he's going to all of these
He goes to the
shows,
yeah.
and he's trying to figure out, I mean, it's pretty quickly that people find out that he's not in it for the salmon.
He's maybe not a subtle detective either. He kind of goes right up to people. So, how about those indigo
buntings?
What about that? And then the guy's like, yeah, I'm not talking to you. He also starts diving into, he keeps asking Edwin for an interview because he's not in jail. He keeps asking him for an interview, and finally, after years,
he finally
he
says yes.
agrees. And it ends up being this like 8 to 10 hour interview.
And he doesn't think he's going to meet them. They meet in like a hotel room. He even hires security,
Bodyguard.
like a bodyguard. And he asks all the questions that he's been trying to find out.
Including, do you have Asperger's? And Edwin Rist basically says, well, I mean, if you know what the symptoms are, you can show those symptoms.
And enhance them,
Yes,
and embrace
so
them.
He's basically saying he looked up what the symptoms of Asperger's were and presented those in court so that people would think that he did.
like almost straight out says it, and it enrages.
He's sneaky in that interview. Like that, reading that part was infuriating because I don't know where the birds are. I didn't have help. No one else was the mastermind, which is a little cocky. And then that I basically just pretended to have this mental health illness, which
It's not something to pretend
no,
about.
that's
like,
detrimental all across the board.
absolutely.
So you have that interview, and then he gives him the name. He comes across the name of a Norwegian kid who maybe helped. So the author starts thinking, oh my gosh, there was somebody else there with him, which is insane. So he goes to talk to him as well, which he at least shows remorse.
Yeah, like he understands and realizes, and eventually warms up and gives him a lot more details. But the third part just made me so angry after reading the interview, talking to the Norwegian kid. It almost drags on and just keeps enraging you, but like there's never justice.
No,
there's no form of
there
justice.
is no conclusion. And the other thing is, when you're reading the first part of this, you're wrapped up in this Victorian era, and it's really hard to flip the switch. He was on trial in 2011.
This is like recent,
Which means when he did the crime, like, this is not dusty old wooden drawers. This is, they had the ability to be more state-of-the-art than that. And the museum wasn't. Funding, sure. But you see pictures of this kid, and he's just in a button-up shirt and a fur, hooded coat, and you're like, oh my God, it looks like any number of kids that I see walking around all the time. It was literally not that long ago, which is crazy.
Yeah, no, it's recent history, and that's the other thing that I was blown away. So this happened in the last decade, a decade ago.
Yeah.
And I never heard about it.
I didn't either.
How did this happen? How do you not hear about these burglaries or something that was
For such a huge theft.
And maybe if we were in the fly tying community, or maybe if we were involved in that in some fashion, maybe we would have heard about it, but why mainstream did we not hear about
It's
this?
a historical theft. They point out, the author goes to talk to some of the people who work at the museum, and it's kind of funny because he's like, how are you not outraged? And they're like, we're British, sir, we're not. But then they say, it doesn't do the scientific record any good for me to be mad or emotional. But the history of this, the fact that there could be things that we don't even know how to use these birds to look for or to understand about, that could come clear with later technology, and that has been taken from us.
Yeah, we're never going to get that back. Like I outraged this whole time. So yeah, that is essentially, it has really no ending because we don't get anywhere, and it's really frustrating, no justice. But it brings us to, we have about 5 minutes left. It brings us to, well, we got really into
We
that.
did.
It brings us to, we have some questions, and one of the big ones is, I was Googling nonstop about this, and after reading some of the reviews, a lot of other people were Googling too.
So, one of the, we have our questions here. I'm not even going to waste time digging for it though. The question is, where is Edwin Rist now?
What's he up to?
And I was shocked. So he is under a different name, but not that different, Edwin Reinhardt, playing flute, heavy metal flute, in videos in Germany.
Just walking, playing.
Definitely not jail.
Definitely not jail. Definitely, I hope feeling some remorse, but probably not. So that's one of the things that I found interesting researching
Absolutely.
this. And I mean, the other thing is like, things like this happen a lot in other museums all across the country.
Museum security.
In world. And
is-
museums, yeah, and why have we not heard about this? So this is just one of many instances
Yes.
happening. What can we do?
Like,
to protect?
some things get stolen more than once,
Yeah.
is the other thing that I
Numerous
was shocked. There are
times.
certain
Yeah.
items that, not stolen once, not stolen twice, one in 2020, 3 times,
Yeah.
this painting.
How? How does this keep happening?
I don't know.
Well, we have really went overboard on
We did,
what we love.
but
This book was
there's
just
so
so,
much in
it was
there.
so good. Even if you are not a nonfiction reader, like Carrie,
Yeah.
who doesn't prefer nonfiction,
Not usually.
but it just
This
really
one.
does, it's really good. It's a really
So-
good book.
Usually, this is the point where we talk about book recommendations,
Mhm.
but because we love this book so much and talked so long, I think what we should do is, we have some reader's advisory videos that go up on YouTube under the playlist Need to Read. They're called To Read or Not to Read.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those books there.
On a reader's advisory,
So you can go to YouTube, and if you like this sound of this book, we'll recommend, we found so many.
and when those readers advisories post, we'll even drop the link in this
Yep.
Facebook post right below the video so
Yep.
that you can, because
As you can see.
as you can see, we went down this like wormhole of very niche, weird obsessions, heists that people, I mean, our collection is just outraging.
And we found more that we went to order, like it's,
Yeah, now we're becoming,
We're
who's the
obsessed.
obsessed ones now? So we will do some readers advisories on these
So-
and we'll drop them below.
you can click on that link, you can go to our YouTube page, we'll talk more about those kinds of books, but we want to talk about what we're going to read.
Yeah, we want to talk about what we are going to
Next.
read next, which is exciting, and it's in person. Jojo Moyes, The Giver of Stars. And again, has a little bit of librarians, traveling bookmobile librarians.
Yes.
In here, it's it's a newer, popular book. We thought it would be a great choice for our first one to be in person.
Yes,
August 26th,
I believe that's correct.
last Thursday of the month. The only one that will be different is Thanksgiving, obviously
Right,
falls on last
right.
Thursday, so November's the 3rd, but all the other ones in person,
Last Thursday,
right here,
from
community room,
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. One of us will be here chatting with you. There'll be some light
Yes.
refreshments.
Yeah, we'll have some snacks.
Yeah, and we're really excited to get back in person, and I know we hope that you guys are too. So if you want to get a copy of this, pop on down to the library. We have the book on CD,
Yeah, we have large print.
large
We
print,
have
copies of this right now. You can
Ebook.
place hold. Yep, we've got audiobook. All of them are set up in their own different folder on Overdrive and Libby.
And if you come in, we have a display that will tell you the books that we have picked out for the next couple of months.
Now we have all the way out through December right now.
So if this one doesn't sound like your cup of tea, that's fine. Take a look at the other ones.
We've got some science fiction.
Yeah.
We've got some mystery during
yeah.
October. We've got some historical fiction. So we've got a wide variety of books for you. We thank you so much for joining us on our last virtual one, and we
Yeah.
look forward to seeing you in person next month.
Next month.
Stay tuned for those readers advisories, and we'll see you then.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.